Today, we are going to talk about my favorite cameras as of 2025 and which cameras that I think you should go for if you are a beginner, intermediate, or a full-fledged pro. But before we do that, I also want to talk about FOMO and why you shouldn't have FOMO. For those of you that don't know what FOMO is the fear of missing out. And when it comes to gear, there is a huge FOMO because you see something new that is released and then you feel like, I really need that to elevate my content up to here. And then when you get that piece of gear, they realize that it wasn't the piece of gear, it was just the hype of the new tech. And this is coming from someone that is an early adopter. I love having the latest and greatest tech because I'm interested in the tech, not so much in what it can do for my creativity or skill set. I just love the fact that companies are pushing boundaries. But with that said, you also don't need to buy the most expensive camera in order to get the best results, because sometimes a camera like this might just be giving you the best results for the things that you're shooting, or sometimes a camera like this is what you need in order to capture that specific shot that you have in mind, and that can only be achieved with a shutter that is incredibly fast. If you are a beginner, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking that you need to have this, you need to have that, you need to have this, you need to have that in order to be able to make this. And when I started to make YouTube videos, that was the exact feeling that I had. I felt that I needed to have a better drone, a better gimbal, a better camera, a better lens, and so on and so forth, and never stopped up until I reached a point where I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna try to make the best of what I got. That is also when you start to make the best kind of content with the gear that you have. So these cameras is something that I've been using and abusing for years at this point. And the first camera that I want to talk about is gonna be aimed for those of you that wants to start out, that wants to have something that is possible to learn how a camera works, but also gives you a good image quality without breaking the bank. Here in Sweden, the ZV-1 comes in at $700-ish, including taxes. And as you can see on this camera, it has been through some shit. And this is actually my second CV1 that I have. And the things that I like about this the most is the lens. I know it might sound weird because it's not the best lens, but it's a 24-70 lens, which means that when you're out vlogging and want to get multiple different shots, it's easy to just put the camera down, grab the shots that you want, get a little bit of compressed image, and have that variety of shots in the video that you otherwise cannot have with a 1635 lens. And having the camera turn on whenever you flip out the screen is also something that saves an incredible amount of time. You can just bring it out, start shooting, and then when you're done, you just fold it back, and then it shuts off by itself. It's easy to use, fast, and it doesn't take up that much space because you can fit this in your pocket or your tiny little purse. When I was doing daily vlogs back in 2022, this was probably one of the cameras that I used the absolute most. It just makes it easy to get the shots in the moment rather than trying to plan everything and bring out your big camera from your camera bag. You just take this up from your pocket and start shooting. So I can't recommend this enough for anyone that wants to start out making YouTube videos. Now, the downside with this is that it has the absolute worst battery known to mankind. I really wish that Sony would make a camera with the NP-FZ100 battery and a little bit of a bigger grip on this, but with the same kind of lens and same sensor. That for me would be probably one of the best vlog cameras in the world. And if I were to switch over to the ZV-1, then this is what it looks like. Now, I'm shooting this without any sort of picture profile. This is just internal from the camera, because whenever I'm using this camera, I just want to have everything as simple as possible. I just want the footage from the camera to be straight onto the timeline without me having to do anything. You can do some tweaks with this camera as well, but I wouldn't recommend it because it's going to be harder for you to make the image quality look better than what is actually coming straight out of the camera. Then again, you can't compare this camera towards a camera like this, mainly because the lens on a camera like this is bigger. It's almost 2 times bigger than the camera and lens on this camera. When you have a camera like this, you might feel a little bit limited with not being able to switch the lenses, because this is a fixed lens, even though it goes out and zooms whenever you use the zoom rocker. And it gives you a lot of opportunities, but if you want to have those shallow depth of field shots, or you want to have a really long lens or a really wide lens, then you have to go up to something that has an interchangeable lens mount, such as this, which is a ZV-E1. Now, this camera is basically a Sony a7S III, which was released back in 2020, that they have reframed into a different body with a new processor, same sensor, and so on and so forth. But it's in general a better camera that overheats, because the heatsink isn't big enough on this camera to sustain longer periods of shooting. Now, you can buy a fan to put here in the back, but that kind of defeats the purpose of having a compact camera. But if you look at the lens, you can see that it's not that much of a compact camera anymore. Either way, this combo, the 1635 with Sony ZV-E1 and the EZM B1M, is probably my all-time favorite everyday setup for whenever I make my videos, not only my vlogs, but videos in general. And the camera that I'm shooting on right now is the FX3, same sensor that you got in this camera, but this camera feels more user-friendly, I'm gonna say. It's easier to get started with. You have a bunch of different settings that you don't have on the FX3 that makes the UI better for someone that is starting out. The most important thing when it comes to photography and videography is going to be your light, because photography comes from the word photon, and photon is the particle of light. We're capturing photons. A camera like this is, in my opinion, very good for videos, because it's a video-oriented camera, it's a vlog-oriented camera. But when it comes to taking photos, sure, but the image quality is so-and-so. I know that there's a huge debate about people saying like, well, 12 megapixels is enough. I personally don't think so. I think that 12 megapixels is good, but if you are both, you know, a photographer and a videographer, this camera might not be for you. Then I would probably try to look into Sony a7 IV, some sort of a hybrid camera. But if you are a videographer only and you're especially a creator, then this camera is probably going to be one of your best cameras that you can get. If you want to have an even better camera, then something that I've been using for the last year at this point is this. And this right here is a Sony a9 III with an 85mm GM2. It's not something that I recommend to you unless you actually have the money and you know that if you invest the money into this camera, you're going to make the money back from actually investing the money into this camera by getting work with this camera. But it's also a really good camera. You have the global shutter and you have incredible 120 FPS raw photos, which is wild whenever you try it. It's also one of those cameras that I have really enjoyed shooting with when it comes to both videos and photos. I do have the A1 as well, and the size of the image from the Sony A1 is just, I think it's around 60 megabytes, because the sensor is at 50.1 megapixels. This sensor is at 24, and it's more than enough for me. And I found myself actually going for this camera rather than the Sony A1 in almost 99% of the cases whenever I had to choose between the two. Again, this camera is one of those expensive pieces of gear that I would not recommend to any sort of beginner out there. Even if you have the money and you're a complete noob, I don't recommend you to buy this. I recommend you to buy this if you know what you're doing and you really want to have something that is top tier, like best of the best on the market, and you know what you're going to use it for. As a videographer and as a beginner, it's easy to fall into the trap in thinking that if you have a camera like this, you're going to be able to make better content than me. But I'm going to be honest and say that I rather go for this camera than this camera when it comes to making videos any day of the week. And I rather go for this camera than this camera when it comes to making videos any day of the week. And learning how to use a compact camera like the ZV-1 also means that you're going to be able to use a camera like this and get the most out of it whenever you upgrade. Because if you learn how the exposure triangle works with a camera like this, you're going to be able to apply that to any sort of camera in the future. I would love to know, which camera would you go for if you were to buy one of these cameras, and why? Do drop a comment down below. You see that? I've even glued the lens cap because I dropped it and got a dent and it's kind of flopped in halfways. Peter från Sweden saying goodbye. Have a good one.